And the first item we have is a request for bill introductions, and I have a bill to introduce. The number is RS 3609, and this is a state Senate redistricting plan on behalf of Senator Wilburn, and it's called Liberty 2. Make that motion. We have a second. Senator Fagg seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? Oh, aye. Oh, sorry. Senator McGinn.
Is this our map we're going to start with?
I believe so. They just asked if I'd introduce it today, so.
All right, thanks.
And are we able to vote, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you'll be able to vote.
So I vote aye.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Committee, next item we have is we need to reopen our final action from yesterday, Senate Bill 422, and appropriations for fiscal year 23, 24, and 25 for various state agencies. And I recognize Senator Kirshen. 444. Yeah, and 442. It's all together. Chairman, I voted on the side.
He needs his mic on.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, having voted on the prevailing side, I move that the committee reconsider its action on substitute for Senate Bill 444.
Second by Senator McGinn. Thank you. At this time, I'll recognize Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to delete 460 million of the SGF.
Sorry, excuse me. No, excuse me.
Okay.
We need a first vote on the motion to open back up Senate Bill 442. 444 and 442, or 422 and 444. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wondered that. So I'd like to make a motion to delete 460 million from SGF in FY 2022 to not implement a one-time $250 tax rebate included in the governor's recommendation.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Senator Kirshen. Discussion. Committee, we thought we had done this the other day. We had a long discussion in here on this subject, and it had failed on the floor earlier, and we had talked about it, but we didn't have a formal motion, so now we have a formal motion. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Oh, no, may I be recorded? Mr.
Yes, you can, Tom.
Thank you.
No.
Senator Petty is also no?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll record you both. Thank you. Next, we will move on to our presentation on Senate Bill 1. Seems like a Monday. Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the contents of Senate Bill 422 be inserted into Senate Bill 444, that all adopted committee amendments be included, to recommend SB 444 as a substitute bill, that staff be authorized to make any technical amendments, and that the substitute for SB 444 be passed.
We have a motion. We have a second. Senator Kirshen seconds. Is there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
The roll call.
Oh, okay. Sorry, we need roll call. Nancy?
Tally. Clays,
Aye.
Fag,
Aye.
Hawk,
Aye.
Kirshen, McGinn, Petty,
Aye.
Swellentrop, Billinger.
Aye. All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Next, we will move on to our presentation on Senate Bill 341 and removing federal impact aid from the determination of local foundation aid in Kansas School Equity and Enhancement Act and removing, excluding Fort Leavenworth School District and virtual school students from the capital improvement state aid determination. We'll have a overview by Tamara Lawrence, Webex.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 341, as amended by Senate Committee, would amend the Kansas School Equity and Enhancement Act to remove federal impact aid from the definition of local foundation aid, and would also amend the capital improvement state aid calculation by excluding Fort Leavenworth School District and virtual school students. Additionally, the bill would extend the sunset on the bond obligation maximum. So first, I'll talk about federal impact aid. And if you'll bear with me for just a moment, I just want to refresh your memory a little bit about this because it's been a while since the legislature has addressed this topic. There are three types of foundation aid in the school finance formula. One is local foundation aid, two is state foundation aid, and three is the total foundation aid. State foundation aid is determined by subtracting local foundation aid from total foundation aid. Currently, the definition of local foundation aid includes an amount equal to 70% of the federal impact aid of a school district. Senate Bill 341 would remove that language from the definition of local foundation aid. So for school districts that receive federal impact aid, which most schools do not, this change would reduce their local foundation aid determination, which would increase their state foundation aid. So that's the portion on federal impact aid. So now I'm going to turn to the capital improvement state aid. Senate Bill 341, as I mentioned before, would amend the calculation for capital improvement state aid, otherwise known as bond and interest state aid, to exclude USD number 207, Fort Leavenworth, and students enrolled in a virtual school offered by a school district. For bond elections that are held on and after July 1, 2022, the bill would exclude USD number 207 from the assessed valuation per pupil, or AVPP schedule, that is used to calculate bond and interest state aid for school districts. Currently, Fort Leavenworth School District is included in the AVPP schedule and has the lowest AVPP of all school districts, but it actually does not have the authority to issue bonds. So under this bill, the school district other than Fort Leavenworth with the lowest AVPP would receive the highest state aid percentage calculation. Also, for elections held on or after July 1, 2022, the bill would exclude the number of students enrolled in a virtual school that is offered by a school district from that school district's AVPP determination. Currently, the AVPP of the school district does include students who are enrolled in a virtual school. And the last portion of the bill has to do with the general obligation bond limitations. Currently, the State Board of Education is prohibited from approving any application for general obligation bonds if that approval would result in the aggregate amount of all general obligations approved exceeds the aggregate principal amount of general obligations retired in the immediately preceding year, adjusted for inflation. That provision is currently set to expire July 1 of this year, and this bill would extend the sunset of that provision until July 1 of 2027. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Tamara? Seeing none, thank you, Tamara. We also have Senator Baumgardner on WebEx. Senator Baumgardner, would you like to comment on this bill?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm hoping that you can all hear me.
Yes.
Okay. We feel that this bill is not only important for our state, but it's pretty critical that we get this passed as quickly as possible. The Senate Education Committee did have a hearing on this. We did work the bill. Actually, the hearing and our work was, our hearing was in January. And I think it's important to note that Kansas is the only state in the United States that does not award the federal impact aid in addition to the state funding. And this does currently reflect negatively on our state. In fact, the United States Department of Defense scores against our state in all considerations for military projects or staffing in Kansas. Now, just 2 years ago in 2020, the state of Kansas made a push to land the headquarters for the United States Space Command. We had 4 cities, Leavenworth, Derby, Kansas City, and Wichita submit proposals. Kansas wasn't considered in the end because of our lack of awarding that federal impact aid. It's also believed that this was a contributing factor in the loss of 1 battalion at Fort Riley. In 2021 assessment, McConnell Air Force Base in Kansas was ranked as at the lowest end as being the least supportive active duty bases. Now, I'll remind the committee that there are 157 Air Force bases. The Department of Defense believes that the equalization of federal impact aid has a negative impact on programs and staff that are designed to ease the transitions and provide that emotional as well as academic support to our military students. And we believe, at least the committee did, because it did pass out unanimously from the committee, that it's in Kansas' best interest economically to eliminate the equalization of federal impact aid in the state of Kansas. So federal impact aid currently provides federal assistance to school districts that have a high concentration of children that reside in Native American lands, military bases, low rent housing properties, or other federal properties. You do have a document that I know that your committee assistant uploaded for you. In Kansas, there are 23 school districts with concentrations of children who have parents in the uniformed services or that are employed on eligible federal properties who do not live on federal property. Now, federal impact aid is provided to school districts that have lost property tax revenue due to the presence of tax-exempt federal property or that serve large numbers of federally connected students. So what's happening currently is that in our finance law, local foundation aid is deducted from the amounts that are required by the state to finance state foundation aid from the state general fund. When we remove this, we believe that the bill will positively impact over 44,000 students across the state in Kansas. It will promote Kansas as a leader in education and support for our military families, our Native American families, and our tribal communities. Now, from day one, we knew that the fiscal note for this is $13 million in SGF. And I hope that you are able to look at that spreadsheet to see the list of school districts that would be receiving that aid. The highest amount would be to Geary County Schools, and that's just over 10 million. The smallest amount would go to the Norton Community Schools, and that's just over $4,000. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Senator Baumgardner. Questions? Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Baumgardner, on the percent of the estimated capital improvements per state, we did change that to 51%. The handout that we received was what it was. I'd like clarification that was what it was in the prior to 2015. Is that correct?
Yes, you actually have 2 documents, and that's for that second component. It is with regard to that bond state aid. You have a run that shows what it was in 2015 before the calculations were changed in 2015. And then it has the new run where the base is changed to the 51%. The reason it is set at 51% is when you pull Fort Leavenworth schools out, when you remove that school district. The next you have is Elkhart, and that shows that the base aid would be 0 because they have such a high population of virtual students. So we went to the third school district, which is Galena School District. That's USD 499. And so we set that at the 51%. That is what the current capital improvement state aid is for Galena. And based on that 51%, then we did the run on all of the other school districts. So it's not exact per percent, but it is very close. You only see a deviation of roughly 1 or 2%. You will notice that there are schools that drop out and now will receive no state aid or a significantly reduced state aid. And that is because they were in that category where they had a very high number of virtual students. The committee has discussed this legislation on many occasions. In fact, 2 years ago, a nearly identical bill was passed unanimously by the Senate, but did not make it through the House due to the shutdown of the governor due to COVID. So what we also extended that deadline because we do not want to be in a situation where we do not have some type of a cap on that aid. And one of the reasons that you were provided that printout of 2015, there is a potential issue that we are going to face in the future because at the time that that was put in place for the base, for the bond aid, there were 200 of our school districts that were eligible, more than 200 were eligible for some type of state aid on that bond and interest. And right now, we have only 112 school districts that are eligible at all for any of that bond and interest aid. And if you look at that, if you look at the printouts, you'll see that listing. By changing the base at 51%, you're going to see a listing of a whole lot of school districts. And for some of our smaller districts, it will be virtually impossible. We've heard from them. We've heard from those school districts, from superintendents, from school board members. They don't feel that they'll ever be able to pass a bond referendum because that full obligation is on that school district. So that's what those two documents are that you have been provided.
Senator McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Baumgardner, I'm a little confused. You talked about some that might be 0 because of virtual. Could there be other reasons? So what I'm looking at, I'm looking at Burton School District on page 3. And the reason it is a little confusing to me is it's typically been a poor district. It's a 1A school, but I don't see this school as being a high virtual school at all. So is there something I'm missing here?
Now, we have a small number of school districts that have virtual programs. My comment, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear with it, those school districts that have virtual, they would be the ones that saw a significant change as far as what they would receive by going to the 51%, simply because they weren't included. Now, the others that are zeroed out, that is going to be where they fall in line with that LOB valuation per pupil.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That discussion we just had, about 51% is on the amendment. We haven't issued the amendment yet. So that's on the base,
Correct. That's
on the base bill.
the recommendation.
Okay, Senator Hawk has a question. Senator Hawk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a comment, and then I'm guessing Senator Baumgardner may want to respond, but I want the committee to know that I support this bill. And the two parts to it, the one, well, I'm concerned about both parts or supportive of both parts, but wanted to make a few comments about impact aid, and if that leads to some comments or questions from Senator Baumgardner, good. I think the point that she made in terms of the Department of Defense scoring us against our state because of that, I was superintendent of a neighboring school district that was maybe jealous isn't the right word, but the Junction City School District got considerably more impact aid than my district did in Manhattan. And of course, our assessed valuation is higher, and that was a good thing for us, but certainly cost our taxpayers more money to build schools and capital outlay and so on. But I think that the times have changed significantly. I understood there was a lawsuit that was lost in one state that had a similar equalization formula. I'm not sure they were exactly like Kansas. And then another state changed. And so we're now the outlier on that. So I think it's pretty critical that we not have a black eye in Kansas in terms of being seen as not supporting our military bases and our military students. In fact, it's my personal belief that Kansas is the most supportive state for our military. We've passed several different bills to be military friendly in terms of military Bill of Rights, et cetera. We had a second count date. So it's not accurate if the Department of Defense views Kansas as not being supportive. And we always have the threat of BRAC in terms of the base realignment and closure process. Several years ago, we had a big community rally in Junction City. I think there were nearly 900 to 1,000 people that showed up for that as the military sent out teams to look at communities to assess their support. So I think it's important that we pass this. These are tough times. We have a serious international crisis going on in Ukraine and Russia. We're deploying troops. I want to make sure the military really recognizes how very supportive Kansas is. So that's a critical piece of it. On the school funding, as a former superintendent, I sort of like the equalization formula. Manhattan got to keep about $66,000 in terms of our 30%, where Junction City had nearly $4 to $5 million. And as Senator Baumgardner said, that will give Junction City give them more impact aid with this. Junction City also had a heavy impact aid, which was another category that did not come under our school finance formula. Unfortunately, the formula has changed so that it's not likely that they'll be receiving that. So I think it's even more important that we do this. They just built a new high school. It's an incredible facility. The state kicked in 44% in terms of the second part of this bill to help them build that high school. The military funded the largest portion of that, but they need money in capital outlay to do maintenance. And because they don't have the tax base that neighboring districts have without the military base, that's a problem. It's also a problem for the Indian reservation, particularly Royal Valley. If you look at your list of schools, they have a high percentage of their land area on military reservations. So their ability to raise revenue with their tax base to build new schools is inhibited. So Senator Baumgardner mentioned there are 23 school districts, and there is a fiscal note to this. as I see it, and this may be my question for Senator Baumgardner in that context, I think that it could range from 13 million. Formula may have some effect on it, could be as high as 17 million in some other years. But in order for us to keep our Gannon payments, because we're not putting that 70% back into the coffer, that's why we need to make that up. And I don't know if anybody, initially I had a concern about fiscal note, but as I learned about that, those 23 school districts, and not all of them, that they include Junction City and Fort Leavenworth and Manhattan and Derby and Royal Valley, and some of those that may get a little more money than the 4,000, which is the smallest one. But I think to keep us whole, we need to have that in the bill also. And I just wanted to confirm that with Senator Baumgardner. I suspect some people may have some concern about why can't we just pass this and why is there a fiscal note? I've come to believe that we need to make that payment. Could you elaborate on that, Senator Baumgardner?
I can. I'll start off with what you first spoke to with regard to BRAC. And the fact of the matter is, for those of us that I know are participating virtually and in person that have education background, we certainly know what happens if there's a grade for one test and it's 100%, and there's a grade for another test and it's 0. And quite frankly, that's where the state of Kansas is right now. So we've got an A+ for other legislation that's been passed on behalf of our military families, and we have a 0 with regard to this particular issue. So that consistently, because we're the only state that does not follow really what the feds believe are the guidelines, that puts us at the bottom of the list every time. With regard to Gannon, I'm first going to give, and I'm not certain if Senator Longbine is there or not. He said that he was going to attend in person or virtually, but he spent most of this past summer working to try and make sure that any changes would absolutely put us in a position where we would not be going back to court for a violation of Gannon. The feedback that he and I have received from other school districts is, nope, for the betterment of the whole, we need to make this happen. And so, again, there is that risk if we were to not fund this, there would be that risk of going back to court with regard to Gannon.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Could I ask one other question, Mr. Chairman, on the
Yes.
second part of the bill?
Go ahead.
That's on the capital improvement state aid. I think Senator Alley was mentioning there might be an amendment, but that also seems to be, I know it's put into this bill and it's probably as good a place to do it as any, but I wanted to be clear with Senator Baumgardner. We're still capped out in terms of what we can do to that, as I understand it. I wanted to be clear about that. That's capped because we can only issue bonds for what we paid off previously. So this doesn't really add any fiscal note. It just makes a fair formula by taking out Fort Leavenworth and those virtual schools. Is that correct?
That is correct. The other thing that it does is, we have school districts where there is no obligation to the state at all.
Right.
And so if you have a large school district that is maybe building 3 new schools because of their growth, they receive no state funds to help them as far as bond aid. But that wipes out the limit, so it pulls them out. So it's only those, it limits those where there's that state obligation. But there is not, that is considered to be neutral with regard to any expenditures. Absolutely. Now, that would change, I can tell you that would change if we don't pass this, because the deadline that is built in there ends at the end of June. So that would change immediately.
So I would agree it's important we get that done. Thank you, Senator Baumgardner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Was there any other questions for Senator Baumgardner? Seeing none, we'll move on to our Senator Longvine. Gee, my knee.
Good morning, Chairman Billinger.
Sorry.
It's all right. We've had some problems with that this week, haven't we?
I was going to call you Mr. Vice President again, so.
I'm going to get Wilbur moved out of his office before it's over.
Oh, gosh.
I
Welcome to
really
committee.
appreciate the opportunity to address you today. I want to, the portion of 341 that I'm most concerned about is the federal impact aid, and I'd like to give you some background on that. Before I do that, I would like to recognize the fact that we do have the CFO from Fort Leavenworth here. We have a board member from Gary County School District. We have Ben Jones, our state school board member from the Gary County area. We also online, I don't know whether it's YouTube or Webex, so we may not be able to converse with them, but we also have the superintendent of Gary County Schools, the superintendent of Fort Leavenworth, and we have retired General Perry Wiggins, who is the head of the Governor's Military Council. I am also a member of the Governor's Military Council. I have been since 2014. General Wiggins is the chair. He was first appointed by Governor Brownback and was retained by Governor Kelly. General Wiggins is a retired three-star general who had a very decorated career in the military. He, at one time, was the commanding general of Fort Riley, so he is very familiar with this subject matter. He also, thankfully, and kudos to Kansas, when he decided to retire from the military, he came back to Kansas and resides just outside of Chapman. So he has been very influential. The Governor's Military Council is to advise the state on proper ways to enhance our military presence, and we have a number of initiatives that we've worked on over the years. General Wiggins works directly with the Department of Defense and other parties in Washington to make sure that Kansas is strongly being considered, not only for our current bases, but to make sure that our military readiness is in proper shape and that we have the proper number of troops. And he has been very instrumental in not only gaining excess troops to Kansas, but also retaining, most importantly, the troops that we already have. Senate Bill 341 came out of discussions that we've had in the Military Council for the last couple of years, and General Wiggins' discussions that he had with the Department of Defense. What it comes down to is federal impact aid is sent to the state of Kansas. It is for those primarily military and district and Indian land districts. It is a replacement designed for the loss of property tax revenue because of federally exempt land within the school district. Gary County schools not only is the school district for Junction City, but they also deliver all of the services for Fort Riley. They have grade schools and middle school on Fort Riley Post. Then they have all of the military kids, whether they are on post or off post, all attend Junction City High School. And so Gary County does a great job with our military children. The discussion started a couple of years ago, and mainly because at that time, Kansas became the only state that equalized federal impact aid. And so when the Department of Defense was talking about the education of military children, the importance of education of military children and the assistance that the Department of Defense and the federal government gave to the state to educate those military children, Kansas was the only one with a red. everyone else was green. And so while we can't say for sure, we do think it affected our ability to get Space Command bases in Kansas. It has certainly been a point of discussion within the military on troop alignment and troop deployments. So it is extremely important to our military installations. When we just started discussing in more detail last summer about how we might fix this, I told them I would be more than happy to sponsor it, but there were some things that I had to have. And number one was I didn't want anything that would affect equalization in the state of Kansas. As far as the Supreme Court case that was on the equity side that was settled a number of years ago, I didn't want anything that would affect Gannon. And from a political standpoint, I didn't think it made a lot of sense to ask 35 senators to vote for a cut to their own school districts within their district. And so working through this, we found that the easiest way to do that was to make sure that we held each school district harmless on the 70% of the 17 million that comes in federal impact aid. We wanted to hold each district harmless. There are only 20, I think there's 24. We talked about maybe 23 districts in the state that qualify for federal impact aid. And so I didn't want a situation where we had 23 school districts getting the money that they deserved and that was intended for them, but that meant that 261 districts had to take a cut because of it. So that is the $13 million fiscal note, is to make sure that each is even. In further discussions with the revisers, I think we determined that as long as no school district takes a cut, we should be in compliance with Gannon. So this should prevent us from having any problems with the Gannon lawsuit, the Gannon decision. I feel good that we're on good grounds on equalization. And so I would ask that the committee strongly consider and pass out favorably Senate Bill 341. I'll be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Senator Longvine. Are there questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a amendment for this bill, and I think we can pass those out if you could, please. As you see in the first paragraph, if we exclude Fort Leavenworth School District and virtual students from the capital improvement and extending the obligation bond limitation. If we do that, currently you'll see what we pay is based on a 75%. With these two school districts, these Fort Leavenworth out and the virtual students removed from that base to hold them harmless and make sure that we're not adding or subtracting to either one. We changed the base to 51%. And by doing that, you'll see in your packet that the school districts are virtually get the same amount of impact aid. So with that, the motion is to add this amendment. The only change is basically on page 13, if it shows on there, line 7, and it says the state aid computation percentage is 75. We're changing that to 51, and that is the only change to that.
Questions on the amendment? Well, we need a second first. We have a second. Senator Fagg seconds. Questions on the amendment?
Question,
Questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hawk.
Yeah, Senator Alley said impact aid. Did you mean impact aid, or did you mean that capital improvement state aid?
Senator Alley.
Capital improvement, excuse me.
Okay, not him. That doesn't affect
Not the
this impact aid
It's a
question.
capital improvement.
Okay, I thought so, but I just wanted to make sure that we didn't cause, after Senator Longbind's presentation, I wanted to make sure we didn't mess that up. So thank you.
Thank you. That was my mistake for reading IMP as impact and not improvement.
Other questions? Senator McGinn.
Been a very long time since I've been on education, so you explain to me, how did we get to that 75%?
At current,
Is there an estimate?
Senator Alley.
if you go to your
See it.
one here that shows two columns, 75 and for today, we are at 75% of our base with the virtual students in there and with Leavenworth in there. To keep that level playing field, we have to reduce that to 51.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Senator Alley.
Thank you. Then I would like to, we have a bill House Bill 2567, and I'd like to remove the contents of House Bill 2567 and insert the contents of 341 as amended into that House bill.
We have a motion, we have a second. Senator McGinn?
What was the House?
Oh, it's the only one we have in Ways and Means. That's a House bill, and it has to do with the treasurer's bill on, I think they're going to reduce some fees. And the plan is that Monday, we will get another House bill sent to Ways and Means, and we will insert it into another House bill next week. It was the only one we had today, and we're trying to expedite this legislation, so we thought we'd put it in the only one we had. So we'll get one back next week from maybe Senator Longbine. Other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. That's what I was going to say. We want to just go ahead and kick it out now. Okay, we had the motion by Senator Alley, and the second was by, who, did you second that, Senator Fagg? Senator Fagg said he seconded it. Are we okay now? Okay. Now, I would look for a motion to go ahead and kick this bill out. Senator Alley? Second by Senator McGinn. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We need to make sure we get it correct here. Senator Alley, we need to make sure this is a substitute motion.
Right.
Substitute bill.
For
Right. So we need that in the motion.
Senate substitute for House Bill 2567.
Seconded by Senator McGinn. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion carries.
I was an aye there, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And everyone was an aye, no one opposed, correct? Okay.
I was an aye also, sir.
That's why I thought so. Thank you. So Senator Longbine, thank you, and the folks from the fort over there, we appreciate you getting up and coming over in the snow. Sorry about that, but thank you. Committee, next we'll work on Senate Bill 340, amending the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act by clarifying the responsibilities of the State Board of Regents and post-secondary educational institutions and authorizing designation of additional programs and fields of study We'll start out with an overview from Tamara Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning again, committee. So the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act established the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program, and this program provides last dollar scholarships to eligible students to attend post-secondary educational institutions in an associate's degree program or career and technical education program in certain job fields and career pathways. This program went into effect on July 1 of 2021. So current law establishes the program and requires the State Board of Regents to administer the program. And it also provides the duties and responsibility of the State Board of Regents with respect to the program. Section 2 of this bill would amend certain responsibilities of the Board of Regents, and you can see that on pages 2 and 3 of the bill. Section 2 would also add responsibilities for the State Board of Regents, including accepting electronic signatures, enforcing Promise Scholarship agreements, establishing that no institution may limit scholarship awards to certain programs or award less than the full scholarship amount that a student qualifies for. Additionally, Section 2 clarifies the information required to be provided in the annual report to the legislature and which associate degree programs may be designated as promise eligible programs. Current law also allows eligible post-secondary educational institutions to designate an additional program as a promise eligible program if it corresponds to a high wage, high demand, or critical need occupation. Section 3 of the bill would amend program to field of study. This would allow eligible institutions to designate an additional field of study, which might include multiple programs, not just one program. Institutions may designate a field of study to meet local employment needs in the areas of agriculture, food and natural resources, education and training, law, public safety, corrections and security, or distribution and logistics, if the programs within that field of study correspond to high wage, high demand, or critical need occupations, and those programs are offered as part of a field of study that the institution already has and maintains. Section 4 of the bill provides for scholarship award amounts, limitations, and appropriations for the scholarship awards. Section 4 would state that Promise Scholarship Awards can be awarded for up to 68 credit hours or a total of $20,000 over the lifetime of the student to receive the scholarship, whichever one of those occurs first. Additionally, Section 4 would prohibit scholarship awards from being used to fund prerequisite classes that are not part of a Promise eligible program or remedial courses unless they are offered in a co-requisite format. Section 5 of the bill provides the requirements for a student to be eligible to receive a Promise scholarship. This bill would add the requirement that a scholarship recipient be a U.S. citizen. It would also allow students who have been in foster care at any time while in high school to be eligible to receive a scholarship, and it would additionally clarify the requirements for adult student eligibility. Section 6 of the bill provides the requirements for the Kansas Promise Scholarship agreements and the consequences for a student's failure to satisfy those agreements. The bill would take effect upon publication in the Register, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Tamara? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation, Tamara. What is an eligible post-secondary education institutions?
So if you look on page 1 of the bill, this is actually defined starting in line 14, but essentially it's any community college or technical college in the state, the Washburn Institute of Technology, or any not-for-profit institution of post-secondary education operating in Kansas that offers one of these 2-year programs.
Thank you. Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Tamara. Senator McGinn.
Thank you, Tamara. So do they have to have some kind of a certification? When you said just any nonprofit? I mean.
Yeah, so I can clarify that for you. So the nonprofit language starts on line 18, and that's that whole paragraph C. So it's a nonprofit institution of post-secondary education in Kansas that offers the Promise Eligible program, which are those 2-year programs. It's operated independently and not controlled or administered by any state agency or subdivision of the state. It means open enrollment and is accredited by a nationally recognized accrediting agency for higher education.
Is that more likely to be our private colleges? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Other questions for Tamara? Tamara, I might ask you one. What year did we implement this?
Last year.
Last year, so we've had 1 year. And how many applications were submitted for last year?
I don't know how many applications have been submitted. I would have to defer to someone, either Senator Baumgardner or someone in higher education to answer that question.
Okay, I'll wait for that and I'll ask Senator Baumgardner. Thank you, Tamara. Any other questions for Tamara? Seeing none. Next, we'll have Senator Baumgardner.
Thank you.
Still there? Okay.
I'm here. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 340 is the trailer bill for the Kansas Promise Scholarship. So while we voted on it unanimously out of the Senate and I believe unanimously out of the House last year, it started implementation July 1. So that means it did not include any enrollment for summer semester because that had already been in process for all of the institutions. We actually have 34 colleges that are participating in the Promise Scholarship. So when it first began would be fall semester. And with regard to participation in this fall semester, we do have, in the fall semester, we had 663 students that were receiving Promise Scholarships. 151 of them were in advanced manufacturing and building trades areas. 28 were in early childhood education. 376 were in that mental and physical health care. 75 were in information technology and security programs. And 33 were in the program designated by the individual institutions. Now, to give you a sample of, we don't know exactly how many applied for a scholarship, but we do know at just one of our institutions, one of our community colleges, they had 52 students apply. 22 scholarships were awarded. 9 of them that applied didn't receive the Promise Scholarship because they completed FAFSA and didn't realize that all of their costs were fully covered by the Pell Grant. So that's a plus for us because we believe they wouldn't have even applied if they had known that they were eligible for Pell. 13 of those 52 students were ineligible. Let's see, 8 were reviewed, but the students didn't complete action. So, we're seeing a lot of people coming in and filling out applications. Some of them don't complete their application. Some of them, quite frankly, are not eligible because they've filled out the application, but it doesn't, the program of study that they want to go into isn't one of those that's an accepted field of study. We also have students, particularly that are attending institutions that are around nearby state borders, and they don't want to commit to that requirement of working for 2 years and living for 2 years after completion in the state of Kansas.
Other questions? For
Senator Hawk here, if I could.
Senator Hawk, go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Baumgardner. We talked briefly before the meeting started. Just special thanks to you for your effort in getting this program launched and the work you did to do that. I asked a question earlier and could maybe for the group and explain to me, the age requirement initially was age of 21. and this trailer bill change. What was the thinking of having that for 21 and older versus the change now?
Okay, the original language of the bill was that they either enrolled and applied for the Promise Scholarship within 12 months upon completing high school, or they were 21 years or older. And that was, got out of high school and realized, whoa, I should have been looking for a next step to have that career and technical ed training. That became a real stumbling block for colleges, because what if they applied, but then they had a birthday? Or what about kids that graduated in December from high school? And so we removed that. In fact, we did several things to really, the trailer bill is designed, this is a large project when it involves so many different institutions, as well as considerable responsibility for the Board of Regents to oversee it. And so we did put in several changes in this trailer bill that kind of constrict or control not only the fields of study and the programs that can be offered, but one of the things that we opened up was to eliminate that stumbling block of what they refer to as the age donut hole. So we got rid of that. I don't see that it will have a significant impact in the number of students that are going to jump on board with this, but we did address that. We did keep the fact, so let's say they're applying at age 21 or age 20. If they didn't graduate from a Kansas high school, they have to have resided in Kansas for at least 3 years to be able to apply.
And follow up to that, do you think, I think there's $10 million in this
There is
program
$10 million.
budget. Do you think that with some of these changes, do you think that's adequate to take care of the need?
Well, our estimate right now is that we're going to be right at about the $5 million mark for this first fiscal year. We had already put in legislation that it would still be capped at the 10 million for next year. And just for the committee's understanding, not only did we have the hearing on this, but we worked the bill with amendments 4 different sessions in our committee. It's my understanding that the reason it's now in your committee and was not sent back to education, I can't speak to that, but there is a concern about the $10 million, because the language that we did have in the original bill, it stated that for any subsequent years after the second, that the funding could not exceed 150% more than what was expended. So there is an amendment, because unknown people are concerned about that 150%. So there is an amendment, but I anticipate probably not year 3, possibly not year 4, but there will be time that community colleges, technical colleges, and the private non-for-profits, as well as the Board of Regents, will be coming and saying, we can't live within a $10 million cap. Now, I look at this, and the reason I say probably for some period of time, because keep in mind, these are for certificate programs or associate degree programs. Associates typically are going to take 2 years for a student. So when a student applies, we are essentially going to encumber funds that we're going to need for the second semester, the third, and the fourth. For a certificate program, it might only take 1 or 2 semesters. So we'll encumber based on what that duration of the certificate program is. But it's also important to remember that if a student is enrolling in just a 1-year certificate program, that means they fall off by that second year to make available the slot for other students coming in. Also, we know that the first semester of a student, let's say they're going into dental hygiene. That very first semester is the most expensive because it includes, and that would be true for welding and other of the other degree programs, because they need those tools at the beginning of their learning. And so that makes that more expensive.
Thank you, Senator Baumgardner, for that explanation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation too, Senator Baumgardner. I was wondering, you mentioned 34 colleges participated. How many colleges could have participated in the state? What kind of coverage are we getting?
So every one of our community colleges is participating. Every one of our technical colleges is participating. At this time, we do not have every one of the private not-for-profits because they don't, each of them does not have any type of certificate or 2-year degree programs. So right now, those that can participate are participating.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Baumgardner. At this time, I recognize Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have an amendment. So if we start on the amendment and we go to, which is page 4, and the first change is a punctuation mark, taking out the word and added a comma. On line 5, we insert the balloon, which is measures post-secondary and educational institutions have taken in working with private business and industry in the state to determine the appropriate field of study and review of employment of scholarship recipients who have graduated from the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program, including but not limited to employment fields and geographical locations of such employment. I think this was added in there just to make sure that we get a report back from the institutions. And then the next balloon would be on page 6, line 28. We scratch on D there, we scratch the for fiscal year 22 and 23 and insert for fiscal year 23 through fiscal year 27. And then on line 29, after the $10 million, we scratch the next paragraph, or the next for fiscal year 24, and each fiscal year thereafter, the appropriation shall not exceed 150% of the amount distributed in the promised scholarship for the immediate preceding year. So we're scratching that out and limiting this to $10 million for the years 23 through 27. And as the concern, and I think Senator Baumgardner said that you will get, well, let's go on to the next balloon, which was on page 8 and line 19. And you see you scratched 30 and then inserted 48. And then we're going to insert the balloon and make that 36 months date of the scholarship was first awarded. And by doing that, that takes a little bit of the concern off for the $10 million, and then we'll get a report back from the colleges. So the last balloon is a technical error, which is on page 10, line 2, and it said exceeds 48 months. We are bringing it back to 36 months to coincide with the last balloon. And with that, stand for questions.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Senator Fagg, second. Okay, questions on the balloon? Senator Solentrum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what we're looking at on page 6 in lines 28 and thereafter is a limitation of $10 million, flat $10 million. There's no multiplier that would be applicable to this program with this amendment. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Senator Solon-Trump.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to strongly oppose this. You know, we've been talking all session about jobs, needed jobs in this state. Wages are rising rapidly, and we want to encourage students to pursue education in our most needed industries. And that's what this bill does. The coordinated effort by our private sector, along with our educational institutions, to identify those jobs, get students involved, and get them moving forward. This program's only been in place 1 year, last July. A multiplier of this amount that's in the previous program does not have this run amok. It's very controlled. And if we think there needs to be a limitation, then I think we need to wait a year or two to allow our institutions of higher education to pursue these scholarships to fulfill the needs we need in the private sector for employment. So again, this section of it, I'm strongly and adamantly opposed to it. This is small dollars. These are small dollars when we're talking about our economic impact in the state of Kansas to promote employment and to focus on jobs in areas that we need in the future. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Alley.
I certainly agree with Senator Solon-Trump. This is an important scholarship. I also agree that we need to make sure that these scholarships are out to students and they're for the workplace, for the industries that we have. I think that was the reason this was placed in there was it was only for 2 years, 22 and 23. We also know that during 22, it's only been there a year, and we had some issues with the schools applying the money. They were supposed to go to the scholarships. They went to the schools, and I think that there's some correction that's going to have to be made in the funding of the scholarships, and I think the schools are trying to correct that. The issue that for this 10 million is, and you heard from Senator Baumgardner that this thing is a 36-month program. And after the 36 months, the first one rolls off and it funds it again. $10 million a year for 5 years. After the 5-year period, we can take a look at it again. If during that 5-year period and we exceed that, we have a report that comes out every year. That's required in here. How are they using the program? Who's using it? But let's don't give them a 150% increase and not knowing exactly how they're using the program. That was the intent, was to make sure that they're using it properly and it is being used. And then we can also increase it. That's our prerogative here during that time frame. If they need more money, let's see how it is. That's the reason we limited $10 million a year.
So Senator Alley, you're saying there's 10 million going in every year for the next 5 years? Is that? $10 million. So they are getting 10 every year.
If you put the multiplier on it, if they use, let's say they use 5 million.
Mike.
Excuse me. Okay, pardon me. If, as Senator Baumgardner said, that this year they use $5 million, next year the limitation would go to, well, the limitation next year is $10 million. But if it was next year, the 150% would be $7,500,000. And if it got to that, maybe used 8 million, then it becomes 12. I'm just saying, let's take a look at it, limit it to what we have here today for 5 years. If we're using it and if it's a great program, which we hope it is, then we can change that number a little bit later.
Senator McGinn.
Okay. Now I'm going to explain it and you can tell me where I'm wrong. So you get 5 million per year under the current, 10 million per year, not just this 22, 23,
It's a $10 million program.
per year.
It's limited to $10 million between 20, this says
so-
between 22 and 23, the program's limited to $10 million.
So now it's 10 million in your amendment, it's 10 million from 23 to 27.
And each year thereafter, yes, is what it says.
Is it 10 million during that time period, or is it 10 million per year during that time period?
Senator Alley.
If I may, I would like to yield to Senator Baumgardner to clarify that situation.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Baumgardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first of all, I'm not going to say that this is my amendment, but it's my understanding. And this is why, quite frankly, one of the things that that you as a committee need to give some consideration to. We believe we're between 5 and 6 million to be dispersed through the scholarship to students for this fiscal year. Right now, this money is being counted toward maintenance of effort. So if we don't expend the 10 million, you are going to need to allocate what's remaining so that we get to count it toward maintenance of effort. We built into this trailer amendment that each quarter, rather than the Board of Regents sending money to each institution, guessing what might be needed by students, they are instead going to reimburse. So starting the new fiscal year, September 1, every institution that has promised scholars, they have to send into the Board of Regents what was committed for the students. By September 15th, the institutions will receive a payout from the Board of Regents. And so every quarter, September 15th, December 15th, March 15th, June 15th, there will be those payouts. I put that into the trailer bill very specifically so that, here we are and it's March 10th. So we would already know for Ways and Means what has been expended in those first 3 quarters of the year, so that if additional funding was needed to meet either that 4th quarter or to address what we believe would be demands for the next year, it could be handled in that way. It is my understanding that the intention of the balloon amendment on page 6 is that each fiscal year it will start at 10 million and those funds will be dispersed on a quarterly basis. That's my understanding, with the notion that if 10 million isn't expended, it goes back into SGF and is utilized in a different manner.
Senator
Not a
McGinn.
carry forward.
Is it 10 million per year? So I'm looking at the current language without the amendment. It's 22, 23. So I'm going to assume it was 10 million, not to exceed 10 million, the way the bill is written. The way the amendment is, I'm trying to understand, is it 10 million per year, or is it only 10 million for 2023 through 27 that can be expended? I'm just trying to figure out how much we're going to spend per year.
Senator Baumgardner.
The intention in what I would consider the base bill is that each year for the first 2 years, 10 million would be budgeted. The way it originally was, which is being amended, was that when you got to that 3rd year, appropriations through Ways and Means would never exceed 150%. What this is saying, I believe the intention is every year you will appropriate $10 million to the Promise Scholarship.
Thank you.
Other questions? Senator
Yes.
Clays online? Did you have a
Mr.
question?
Chairman.
Yes.
I have a substitute motion that I'd like to make to pass the amendment as it stands and insert a sunset on the act at the conclusion of 2027.
So same amendment, but add a sunset, is that correct?
Correct. At the conclusion of 2027. It's my understanding that 23 to 27 institutes a cap, but I would like the act to sunset at that point so that we can review it. Well, we or whoever's, elected.
So we have a motion for substitute. We have a second? Pardon me? Senator Fagg seconded it. Okay, any discussion on the substitute amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Senator Petty.
So this item was discussed in committee, and the committee, the Education Committee, and so we came to determination not to include this. This is subject to appropriation every single year. So I see no reason for a sunset. For one thing, as Senator Baumgardner expressed, we just implemented this in 21. We just passed this legislation in 21. This trailer bill is to help clean up language for the use of the program by the community colleges. And so they have provided input, I shouldn't say community colleges, by the two-year institutions that are participating. They provided feedback on how this can best be utilized for our students. So as Senator Solentroff said, we want to get people employed, and we want to have well-trained citizens in Kansas, and this is providing that opportunity. So I do not support the sunset.
Senator Clays, would you like to respond?
Oh, I would just say that, at the conclusion of 2027, the multiplier is back on and the cap is off. So I would like for this to be something that's reviewed before that happens. And I think a sunset is a perfectly reasonable way to do that. Just as it's subject to appropriation, it's also subject to being reviewed and passed again through the legislative process.
Senator Solentroff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to remind them that we review this every year anyway for the appropriation of it. So it's going to be something that's going to be discussed on an annual basis. Okay. Thank you.
Senator Clays, would you like to respond?
Well, that's true of everything that's an appropriation, but we put sunsets on acts that appropriate money all the time, and especially one that has an automatic accelerator like this. I think it's just prudent to do so. So at the conclusion of 2027, when the cap is off, we would need to review this and not allow it to simply continue in law without having a cap in place and instead having the 150% accelerator.
Senator McGinn, did you have a question?
I don't know if we currently have in here a report, so I don't know if, what happens generally when you put money in the budget, it becomes buried and we never see it again. And, as much as staff loves to do here, how about you produce us a report? But if we could have a report in Ways and Means every year, just because, is there a report in there, Amy? Is that what you're going to tell me?
Mr. Chair.
95 pages.
Senator Petty.
I'm sorry, it's Senator Baumgardner.
Oh, Senator Baumgardner, sorry.
We did receive, and you have received, it's been uploaded for you. The Board of Regents did submit a 96-page summary. Now, it just is a reflection of fall, what happened this fall. But it is also built into, and in the amendment, it even expands what the requirement is for the report. So currently there is a report that was in the original bill. In the amendment, there is language to even expand the report, and you do have the very first draft of it. It looks like this, and it's nice and thick, and it's 96 pages of what happened the first semester.
Senator McGinn.
Amy told me she had one over 100. But anyway, my point is just, back to this whole, whether it's a sunset or not, sometimes they go to a different committee. So let's just say the report goes to education and not to the education subcommittee on the Ways and Means, then it's not brought to our attention. A lot of times people will send out a report on an email, and when you're focused on other committees because you're not on that committee, you might bypass that because you're working. So I'm not trying to mess this thing up. I thought in talking about whether or not we need the accelerator or we don't, I hate seeing we go to 27 and then next thing we've blown up our budget. And as Senator Clays said, you could review it then, and you can always, or somebody says we review it every year at budget. But I just know how these new programs get put in. And then when we're broke, and everybody can tell me in 3 years I'm wrong, but when we're broke, we get to go tell people no. And so those are just my comments, and I can't wait to hear the rest of the conversation. Thank you.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's some confusion here. Maybe I'm the one that's confused, but in D, it did say 22 and 23. And with that, then it said down below, it said for fiscal year 24 and each fiscal year thereafter, the appropriation shall not exceed 150%. That's the accelerator we're talking about. There was no definite time frame that ends. When we go up here on this one, the balloon that we put in was for fiscal year 23 through 27. Essentially, that is a sunset. And then the program shall not exceed $10 million during those 5-year period. The accelerator is removed with this amendment. So whether we have a sunset or not, we review the program after 5 years, and we do get basically the language which we put on page 4 is more reports that are due to us. I would just like to move forward with this, sir.
So are you in favor of the sunset or not?
I believe I will vote for sunset because we're the same years as what we have here, 23 through 27.
Okay, so
we'll review it after that time frame.
Okay, Senator Sondrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you tell me what we just allocated in the budget for demolition of our higher education institutions?
$20 million. Okay.
So we're happy to spend $20 million to demolish various segments of our higher institutions' buildings, but we're coming up with guardrails and restrictions after not even after the first full year of this particular program, in the effort to educate our young people coming forward to fill critical needs in jobs that we need across the state. So, yeah, is there a concern of spending? I've got concerns as much as anybody, but I think we're targeting the wrong group. So, thank you.
Senator Alley, would you like to respond?
I've got concerns with spending also, and this amendment that we have here had been worked out with Senator Baumgardner earlier. We visited with her, and I believe this is the agreement that we'd like to go forward with.
Senator Clays, do you have any additional comments?
No, I just moved my amendment if that's what you're looking for.
Okay, if there's no other questions, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
Okay, motion carries.
I want to be recorded, Mr. Chairman. And we're talking about the substitute motion, correct?
Correct.
So we've just talked, so now we've just added a sunset for 27.
Right, it was on the sunset, it was a motion by Senator Claes to add the sunset on there.
To add it on this amendment?
Right,
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
okay, yeah, that's,
Conclusion of 27.
right.
So,
So
Mr.
we
Chairman,
go
did we
through
just,
27.
Mr. Chairman, point of order?
Yes,
Did we just vote on a substitute amendment that added the sunset, and so we were voting on the whole amendment?
correct.
My substitute motion was to pass the amendment as it stands and add a sunset at the conclusion of 2027.
Thank you. I want my no to be recorded, sir.
Okay, duly noted. So I guess now, Senator Alley?
With that, thank you, sir. We would like to make a motion to pass out Senate Bill 340 as amended.
I have a motion, a second by Senator Fagg. Senator Saltrup, did you have a question?
There was a statement made here earlier that this has been agreed to by some other persons, perhaps from a different committee. Could we verify that?
Senator Alley?
If you are talking about, I was talking about the amendment itself was reviewed. The amendment being the one I presented was reviewed with Senator Baumgardner, and you can talk with Senator Baumgardner. She's online.
Senator Baumgardner, would you like to answer Senator Saltrump's question?
I'm happy to. I can share with the committee that I gave, that there were, during our hearings, the question came up about the funding. And should we change the funding component after the first year? We spent 4 days working this bill, January 18th, 19th, 24th, and 25th. And we passed it out of the committee because I gave the committee an extra weekend from the 25th to the 31st to figure out if they wanted to amend in any manner that funding component. And the answer from the committee was no. When we got there to the 31st, or to the, 31st, they did not want to amend. It passed out of committee unanimously. Now, this bill has been sitting there since below the line since the 31st. It was brought to my attention this last week that there was concerns about the cost. That is surprising because we passed a $1.6 billion Apex bill in less than 30 minutes debate on the Senate floor. It was shared with me by the majority leader. These are the amendments we feel need to be made. That is not my choice. But I appreciated the fact that there was a frank conversation in the majority leader's office that this is what leadership felt they needed. That's why you also have the change in the completion months, and you have the additions to the report that will be provided to the Senate and to the House. In my mind, it always read the original base bill shall not exceed, knowing that the Board of Regents, the community colleges, the technical colleges, and the not-for-profits would have to go before Senate Ways and Means Committee for any allocation of funds beyond the second year. that to us was a given. And if based on the report that would be provided in January by the Board of Regents, as well as that real data from the different quarters of what was actually reimbursed, that would provide the Committee of Ways and Means and their subcommittees the information that they needed to determine allocations, what would be appropriated for this program. Very similar to this, what we refer to still as Senate Bill 155 with regard to high school CTE training. So it was always known that depending on what funds are available would be how Ways and Means would appropriate. So was it my recommendation to cap it for 5 years at 10 million? No, it wasn't. We don't have enough data. Do I understand their fears? I do. I do understand that. And like I did share with the committee, I do believe if you look at Senate Bill 155, the CTE program, it started slow and then it started to spike up. So I do anticipate that perhaps 2 or 3 years from now, what you will hear, or those that are serving in Ways and Means will hear, is we're going to need more than the 10 million cap that's put there. So I appreciate the sunset because that's an opportunity to look at the entire program. Should it be changed? Does the state still need it? But I also see that every single year during this process of appropriations and budgeting, it's almost like a mini sunset. There is no guarantee to what would be appropriated after year 2, even in the base bill. So again, I can just tell you it was discussed. It was discussed at length in committee. The opportunity was there to amend, and it passed out of committee unanimously supporting leaving it the way it was. It really is up to, it has now been assigned to your committee. So it will be up to you. I can only share what happened in my committee.
Thank you, Senator Baumgardner. Any other questions for Senator Baumgardner?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Petty.
So I'm just going to follow up on Senator Baumgardner. I also serve on education. I will say of the committees that I serve on, this bill, we probably spent more time on this particular bill. And I did work originally, I was on education last year, so I worked on the original legislation as well as on the trailer bill. I must give credit to the chairwoman. She spent an exorbitant amount of time working on this legislation, this promised scholarship. And if we are, as a state, are really saying that we are committed to looking for ways to have well-trained employees in Kansas, this was certainly a vehicle for that. The trailer bill helped to alleviate some of the issues that came up once the original bill was passed with the responsibilities for the regent. And it appeared to me that in the original bill, as well as the trailer, adequate reporting avenues were in place. And as she mentioned, the discussion, we did have multiple discussions on the funding stream and the amount of the funding stream. It is disappointing, I should say, for myself as a member of Ways and Means and also of Education, to realize that this committee, that Education Committee, spent the amount of time that the chairwoman mentioned working on this legislation, and then in 40 minutes, Ways and Means is going to make these changes to a bill that is has been able to, or will continue to provide a pathway for a lot of our students in Kansas to higher employment. And and I just want to express my disappointment in the actions that are going on right now.
Senator Alley, you'd like to respond? Or okay, are there any other questions? I wonder if I should wait just a minute for Senator McGinn. Let me see if she's took a phone call, I think.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Petty.
it's Senator Baumgardner.
Oh, sorry. You sound alike. I didn't,
That's
there was
quite all
no
right.
photo up there, so I'm
That's
guessing.
okay. One point I do want to make, and you know, in the end, it will be the will of the body. It's going to be the will of this committee moving out. But there is a component of the bill that, of the existing law that is already in violation, and we do need to get rules and regs were to be completed by March 1st for this by the Board of Regents. That has not happened. That is a part of what's in this this trailer bill, is to change that date. So I do not want to prevent this from moving forward, because we do need to get in compliance and we need to get those rules and regs figured out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Baumgardner. Are there any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, motion carries. Would you like to be recorded, Senator
Yeah.
Petty?
Yes.
Okay. Senator Solentrum? No? Okay. Committee, that concludes our work for today. Did anyone have anything else? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you.